I want to say hello, everybody. I'm talking to the viewers and the listeners of the Henderson Real News Show, Organize, Don't Criticize. I want to thank all our listeners that I know are looking and listening to us in Ohio, in the Pennsylvania area, Indianapolis, and down in Mexico and some other areas. We have gotten notice from some of those folks, and especially up there in the Washington, D.C. area. I have a lot of people that I attended school with that moved after finishing at a local state university. They're living all over America, and a few are in Asia and Africa, and they tell me they see this show, Henderson Organize, Don't Criticize. And we are telling all those folks and others to share the information, pass it along, and do some things that are different. You have to decide you're going to determine your destiny from birth to death in areas where you're in the majority. You must tell yourself that you're not satisfied with being in the lower end of the pecking order, economically and politically. You have to get back to your mind, your real mind, and say, I want to be in position number 2, like I used to be in the 1960s when I could say something and the government would work in my behalf. They would pass laws, even though they knew they were not going to enforce them, but they would pass some. Now, 30 years later, I have no interest in expecting the government to do anything for me, because after all those years, now we are at the bottom of the pecking order, number 10, and every group in America got more respect economically and socially than black folks. And in many cases, it's our fault, which we're going to talk about it today. That's why I want you to pass this information to others. Call them when we go on commercial, because you need to know, ladies and gentlemen, that black people worldwide have the ability to control their destiny from birth to death, because they are basically, when you put what I call the colors involved, 75% of the population throughout the world. And in many areas, black people are 90% of the population. For instance, in Africa. In Africa, ladies and gentlemen, you know we have 55 different nations. And the Europeans, the Middle Easterners, the Russians and the Chinese keep a war going on in Africa. They are making a strong effort every day to have someone fighting. Every time you look around, 2 or 3 times a year, there's a coup, while the black Africans are fighting against themselves. And every time you do the research, you'll find that they're getting weapons from all the countries of the world. Very few nations in Africa, I say nations, not states, very few nations in Africa make big military weapons. They get them from Asia, China, the United States, and Europe. And they are constantly being promoted to fight each other, while the Europeans, the Americans, the Russians, and the Chinese take over the goods and other resources in those African nations. And what we have to do in that area of the world and in the United States and other areas is to unify, build coalitions among ourselves, pool our resources, recruit, train, and select individuals that we're going to put in various areas of activity where they can make decisive votes in those areas of government, economic development, religion, education and training, and politics. All of this, ladies and gentlemen, can be done in 2024, where you can start in January controlling the area where you're in the majority and have new people within 3 years in all facets of government, all of them. Some as new leaders, others as interns, others as people that are on boards of commissions, agencies of control. This can happen in the great state of Mississippi, in the South, in the nation, and worldwide. All we need is a new man to come forth, a new birth, new ideas. And when you have these things happening, it will surprise a lot of people. But once you start seeing change, it will become what we call the order of the day. And that's why I always say, organize, don't criticize. The human enemies of mankind, their relatives and their supporters, ladies and gentlemen, always say, criticize me. I enjoy that. Because when you criticize me, I am seeing that you are suffering. You are wasting your time talking about what I'm doing, and you're losing ground. You're losing ground. Keep on criticizing. I'm going to put some more screws on you. And that's why I have the ability today to have a good co-host with me, Mr. Socrates Garrett. We're going to be talking about what black people must do in order to change their status in areas where they're in majority, in America and worldwide. Anytime you are 75% of the population worldwide, especially in Africa, in certain Latin American countries and Central American countries, and I call the Caribbean one of those Central American areas, black folks ought to be controlling all of those economic activities, all the militaries. But they are not doing it because the Europeans, the Japanese, the Chinese, and the Russians have told those Africans and those majority black populations, let us determine your destiny. We'll build you a railroad. We'll get the mining equipment into your countries and dig your gold and your aluminum and all the other resources. We'll even ship it out to our nation and develop it and sell it to you in 6 months or less at a good price. Just take these weapons and put this new man that just won a Democratic election in your state out of office because he is not what's good for you. And there's always that my co-host, Mr. Socrates, will either agree or disagree with what I'm going to talk about today. And folks, that's why he's here, because he is a man that thinks independently. He started off many years ago in a strong family that stressed education. I understand he had a house full of brothers and sisters, and all of them did well because he had what I call that two-family household, where he had a dominant leader, a ruler that would get support from the other one that was not dominant at the time. But the good news is, when you have a dominant leader in the house, the strongest person is the one that has the ability to get the good news and spread it among the children. That determines the destiny of the family. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce Mr. Socrates Garrett. He is a great Mississippian. He is a former military man, and he is one that believes in making that money. I'm just going to have to say it. He believes in working hard. He believes in working smart. He believes in delegating. But the good thing I like about him, when he's messed over or misused or abused, he's not a coward. He will talk about it. And if things don't get right, he'll start calling names. And that's why I'm proud to have him here today. So, Mr. Socrates, I see that you are here, sir, and I want you to tell the folks what happened to you. What made you change? And you've been working around here in Jackson for many years, and I haven't noticed at all, and I've been looking at your history, you have not made an effort to become the governor, the mayor. You haven't made an effort to become be part of the city council. Now, what's wrong with all the power you have, all the resources? Why are you not in politics, changing things, making things happen in Mississippi that will reflect what could happen throughout the South? Tell the voters, the listeners, and the viewers something about yourself in that regard.
Well, Doc, it's always good to be here with you. I appreciate what you do in this community and how you give of your time and your resources. I have decided that one ought to spend his period of time in his life trying to earn, trying to grow something, trying to build something, try to have some economic influence and power and move in the mainstream. I've read the book that Reggie Lewis wrote, Why Does White Boys Have to Have All of the Fun? and I don't believe they should. I believe that black folk ought to control their economic destiny. They ought to get their fair share of the pie. And I've been fighting for 40 years to prove that point, that we in fact can grow our own economy. And so that's where I spent the majority of my time. Now, I was trained under strong African American leadership. I didn't have any weakness in my training. I feel sometimes like, from my father, who was a strong man, I thought he hung the stars in the sky when I was a child. And I used to walk behind him, jumping in his footsteps, and I said, when I get bigger, I'm going to be able to just walk in his footsteps. And as I got bigger and I got older, his footsteps got further and further apart. It seems as if I was losing ground on just being the man that he was. And that caused me to stay up at night and to work, because back then black folk owned hundreds of acres of land, hundreds of head of cattle, and things of that nature. And black folk today don't own hardly anything, and that bothers me because I don't want to lose ground. And so I spent that time studying economics, studying the principles of economics, studying law. And so I said I had strong black leadership. I went from my daddy's house to a black principal, and I went to Piney Woods under Lawrence Jones, a strong black man that came down from Ohio and created a whole university out of nothing. I saw him do that. I left there and went into Alcorn State University and studied on the president board, a strong black man. And then I went into the work world, and I went to African-American-owned companies and started my career working in Watts, California, with a black man. And so I've had this instilled in me all of my life. And then I went to the European schools after graduating from Alcorn. I went to the European schools and I learned all of their tactics. I went to Xerox Corporation for a while, and I went to Leesburg, Virginia, and was taught there. I went to Miami, Florida, to Bell South Leadership School. I felt like Moses sometimes when I got lost. I thought maybe I was one of them. Then one day I realized that, I'm not one of them, that I am in fact a trodden individual that has to struggle for everything that he accomplished, and then you have to guard against somebody just taking it away from you. And so as I got older and I had proven to myself that I could operate business, etc., in this last chapter I said, I've been successful, but I have not been significant. And so now, Doc, with you, I got a chance to become significant. Now, whether that means we run for political office, or whether that means we support candidates, or whether that means we look at what's going on in the African-American community all over the world, including Africa, including nations in Haiti, including South Jackson, where we have some influence there. And I'm glad to team with you, and I'm glad you give me this opportunity to share my thoughts.
Okay, but that's real good. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard Mr. Socrates Garrett. He is here for that reason and others. But one thing he forgot to tell you about one of the most important institutions in his training. He just let it slip his mind, and that was the U.S. military. Mr. Socrates, tell us, what did that do for you? What did you learn in the military, sir?
Well, military was a great training ground as well. I mean, that's where you learn the discipline that you already had, because if you grew up in a strong black man house or went to black man-dominated environments, you learn to be disciplined and you learn to take orders. But the military got right on top of that and put it in a different perspective. As a private, the sergeant told me, he said, I'm going to tell you this one time, Garrett. When I tell you to roll, I want you to roll. I don't want you to ask me why, because if you ask me why, then you're going to be dead. So I learned to follow orders on the first time given, and I learned how to fight, and I learned all of the essence of war in all of the Army. And so The Army was just a continuation of what had already been planted, Doc.
Well, that sounds good. And ladies and gentlemen, again, this is why I want you all to think about what you just heard. If you want to make it in this world, in the state of Mississippi, in the South, in the nation which we call the United States of America, or become what I call a Pan-African, where you have dual citizenship in America and some of the nations in Africa, you have to have certain what I call Socrates Garrett characteristics. A father, a strong mother, a good education, Pantywood School with a strong black principal. Then he went to a state university, Alcorn State University. He probably could have gone other places, but he didn't get that opportunity. He was smart enough to get a scholarship, but they wouldn't give him a scholarship to another university in the state. He had to go to the segregated university. And then when he got out, he never did allow that to stop him. He went, studied business administration, and he got into something else that a lot of the black folks don't want to do these days. He got into the world of work. He didn't start at the bottom. He said, I'm going to study hard and learn how to make what I call a livable wage. I'm going to not stop with this little training I got these 4 years from this university. I'm going to get additional training so I can sharpen my skills. And after a while, he decided then, not decided, but he was so well respected on the national level until he got drafted. And they said, we got to kill this boy. We don't want to send our rich sons and daughters in this mess. We're going to get Socrates Garrett a chance to get into the military. We're going to give Eldridge Henderson a chance to go to the military so they can fight for us and die for us. So we don't care if they make it or not because they're expendable. They are just alleging to be citizens. We told them that we want them to protect democracy, fight for democracy. And Socrates Garrett said, after they told him, Socrates, if you want to get out of this situation, you better do the same thing that we told Eldridge Henderson before you got here. And that is, if you want to survive, you have to lay low and shoot straight. You got to have some discipline in life or you won't make it. You'll be dependent on me, the government, the rest of your life. And that's why, folks, when you hear when you hear me say, organize, don't criticize, it means that you are more important than you think you are. You can be the most dominant citizen in the world if you think about the fact that you are the most dominant citizen in the world based on population, based on the ability that you have, based on the sources, all the resources at your fingertips that you can control if you just learn how to lay low and shoot straight, politically, economically, educationally, socially. That's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. Learning the rules and playing the rules. Create them as necessary. Form coalitions and partnerships, but don't make them permanent. You cannot survive if you just take one doctrine and practice one religion, or practice being in one political party, or practice loving your enemy, or hating your enemy all the time. You have to do all of this, make changes, and then to make things better for yourself throughout the world, folks, you have to then start training your own folks. But the first thing you want to do is recruit them. Then you select them. And then you train them. Put them in those areas that I mentioned, those areas that's going to determine your life from birth to death. So once you recruit them, train them, you then have to select the ones, males and females, and put them in those responsible areas where they have that great expertise, because you've trained them with some of the best in your community. You put them with local governments, state governments, You put some with law enforcement. You put others with the great church denominations in your area. You assigned others mentors that had the big jobs in the banks and the big corporate entities. And then those folks in a few years were able to run for office, be mayors, be city councilmen. Because in Mississippi, in the South of the United States, you can get your first political job at age 18. You can be your mayor at 21 years of age in most areas. You can be in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, in your 20s and 30s. And you can be the President of the United States in your 40s. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't do some of the things that Socrates did, you will never get in these positions of responsibility, because you want somebody to give you something. And that's why we're going to talk about today, ladies and gentlemen, something that is very, very important, something that most of you don't want to hear about, and that is looking at self in the mirror. We're going to look at self in the mirror today. That mirror will tell you exactly how you look. And then when you look at yourself, you're going to say, I really look good. Let me do a little patting over here. Put a little rouge on this side. Little lipstick on. Going to grease my old bald head. I'm going to put on a new wig. I'm not going to put on anything. I'm going to be the way the Lord made me. But I'm going to be significant. That's what we're going to talk about today. So that's why I want you all to take a few minutes off. In just a few minutes, we're going to have a break. But when we have this break, I want you to just call somebody and say, listen to the man that's talking about being a new person, being a new man. And that's why Mr. Socrates Garrett is going to be asking me some things, and I'm going to be asking him some things about black folks. Some are going to be sensitive. Some are going to be very positive. But all you have to do, folks, just listen and learn. So, Mr. Socrates, the first question to you: do you think black folks would be better off in 2024 than they were in 2023, basically in America, and number two, in other parts of the world?
Doc, I hate to say this, but I don't think we're going to be better off. I think that we have been on a skid downward for the last 5-6 years. I see that continuing. I see many of the principles that you teach about blacks having lost ground in the pecking order, the order of influence, is being our reality. So I don't see us doing well in 2024.
Well, it makes me believe, Mr. Socrates, that you don't have that faith that you talked about on your show a few hours ago.
Well, you talked about it.
Well, we did. We did talk about this faith. So now, do you have faith that we are going to get better in the next 5 years? Or since you say you don't see faith, you don't think it's happening or will happen, so exactly what is the problem as you see it?
Well, faith without work is dead.
Oh, are you criticizing black folks in America and in the world? You saying they're not working properly? They're not looking out for their economic, political, and social interests in this connotation that you are alleging that is happening, where they're getting worse versus getting better?
Oh, I'm absolutely criticizing blacks. I think that back in my day when we had the afros and we saw a black on the side of the street and we gave them the fist pump and the chest pump, it indicated that I know who you are and I know where you're going, what you've been through, and I'm with you. Blacks don't have that allegiance to one another anymore. And so we have had a breakdown in the family, but we have also had a breakdown in the love for one another.
Okay, no problem. Here we are, breakdowns in the family, no love. Well, what about the federal government? Look how they love you. They gave you a chance with some major codifications called the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. They say we're tired of abusing Socrates, Garrett, and all the other black folks in America and the world. We're going to make them citizens after many years of slavery. So we're going to give them a right to vote in this country. And we're going to treat them fairly under something called the Constitution of Mississippi, of other southern states, on the federal level. And then, ladies and gentlemen, they put international agencies together, the League of Nations, the United Nations, and others say we're going to protect the general welfare of all the people all over the world. And every time they had a clause somewhere that said this is for everybody except black folks. And one of the most demeaning and what I call derailing clause was something they had in our Constitution here in America that says, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, say all you good black folks that used to slave in America, said we love you. We appreciated you. We loved you so much until we wanted to continue to help you. We wanted to continue to give you the following: a full-time job, from daybreak to sundown, housing, food, shelter, and give you the most important thing of all, a religion. And here you are, rebelled against us, saying directly and indirectly, I don't want those things. You start running away from us, and you start getting support outside of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and going to other places in the north where you thought they were going to treat you better. Some of you got to those places and you say, hell, we getting worse treatment here in Philadelphia and other places than Mississippi. So we're going to go to Canada. You went to Canada, a few of you. They treat you like a slave there too. Always unequal. No access to what we call full citizenship. And then when you came back to America, which a lot of you did, check your old family histories, and you start trying to get yourself together during this slave period and have all these good 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments to work with you, and you found out you were still in slavery right here in America. We've done the research, folks. We always do research. We don't just talk at the top of our head. They had something called I call it the slave clause in I believe it's the 13th Amendment. It says something about duly convicted of a criminal activity that would get you back in slavery in America and make it legal. And this was in the 1800s, folks. 1800s. Over 100 years ago. And today, that law is still in effect, where you're just one conviction from slavery. I'm not talking about all of you. I'm talking about 90% of the black Americans. Just one court decision from slavery in the United States. You don't believe me if I tell you this. I'm going to let Mr. Socrates tell you about what duly convicted of a crime means that'll get you back in slavery in America, which has been on the books since the 13th Amendment. Mr. Socrates, since people don't want to believe me, you tell me what you think about that slave clause that's still legal in America and most countries in the world. Talk to us about it.
Well, Doc, you call it the slave clause. The 13th Amendment, as you recited, says that anyone convicted of a crime can be put back into slavery. And 90% of our prisons population is made up of African Americans. They've been duly convicted of a crime. Some of them misdemeanors. Some of them trumped up charges, some of them false pretense. Some of them just mean people who decided that you talked too much or that you had too much to say. You were uppity Negro, and therefore they convicted you of being an uppity Negro. And the 13th Amendment said that it was legal for them to put you back in slavery in the prisons.
And that was right after slavery, during and after Reconstruction. Now, folks, I want you to keep in mind, I told you they love you so they fought a war with you to keep you in that good status that you had. Free room and board, free good religion, full-time job, no welfare, medical care if you got real sick. Now, if you were not going to fall dead, you didn't get medical care. They just work you anyway and give you a little whipping here and there to keep you moving and hope that you will get a little rub that night and then you get back out there the next day. They looked after your children too. They didn't stay around home and play all day and use what we call games to keep them busy. They stayed at home until they got about 3 years of age, if they had an old mother slave there that was too old to work, that could probably not walk, probably couldn't talk, couldn't see, but she was able enough to be there, to take the babies and hug them and talk to them, sing to them, and give them hope. And folks, that was love. That's where your people loved you. And then when they passed the law, after losing the war, we called it the Civil War. I know you don't want to hear it. They said, we can't afford to let these black folks go in Mississippi, in the South, in America. We want them. They rebelled against us. A lot of them left us and went and joined the Union to fight against us. We love them. We got them back now, even though they won the war by fighting with the Union. You know, Abraham Lincoln looked out for them and gave them their freedom, which is the biggest lie in American history. Abraham Lincoln didn't give you black folks nothing in America. When he passed that little old proclamation, he only freed the slaves that were in the North, in the area where he was president. He was not president of the South during that period. They had one called Jefferson Davis. So his little proclamation didn't have nothing to do with your freedom until after the war, which they conspired to take that away after about, I would say, less than 10 years, from 1868 to 1877. After then, you've been what I call a non-constitutional recipient up to the day, which I believe is December the 27th, I believe, 2023. So I want you to understand, folks, that this sounds harsh. You heard what you have to do to make it in America. You have to have that strong family. One of the leaders must be the father or the mother. You must get some education and training. You must learn what we call the ingredients of the world of work, which means you got to get out there and learn something, ladies and gentlemen. And then you have to go and learn discipline in order to make it. And that's why I want you all to understand another question. And I want you to answer this question to yourself and to your family and to others. And when you go to the community meeting that a lot of you all are going to be going to this week and next week and all next year, I want you to ask your members, is it better for blacks to criticize the government or pray for justice? Think about it. Shall I criticize the government or pray for justice as a black person? Or, if I say yes, which one? Criticizing the government or praying? If I say no, what are you going to use as a substitute? And that's why Mr. Socrates is here, just to share his opinion on it, and then I'm going to throw in my 2%. And we're going to show you and tell you by examples, ladies and gentlemen. And if you got any young folks around there in that back room, you call them out of that back room. Tell them to turn that phone off. Turn that television set off and learn something for a change. You probably say they don't need to know about this. I guarantee you they do, because in just a few years after you work yourself to death trying to feed and clothe those lazy kids that you won't let them come up right as Mr. Socrates did with that strong family, with that good education and training, where they've been dependent on you, they not going to have anything of any significance if you just allow them to waste their the time in those back rooms on that social media. Get them out there. Let them learn as a family with you. And then you all talk about it. So, Mr. Socrates, is it better to criticize the government or pray for justice?
Doc, we can't pray for something that we have the ability to do ourselves. My pastor says you can't pray for a new car. You don't need God, you need a job. And then you can buy you a car. We can't pray for justice when we have the ability to protect ourselves by building our own institutions, by becoming independent people, by trading with one another, by believing in each other. Worldwide, you always say where you are in the majority, you ought to control those 5 areas from life to death.
Okay, now, let me tell you what problem I'm having in this regard, Mr. Socrates. We go around doing workshops and seminars, ladies and gentlemen, on this very question. And a lot of the attendees in these seminars whip me down verbally and say, you're always talking about independence. So you're always criticizing the government, say the government is making us weak, that the government is doing too much for us. I said, man, you must be crazy. I said, why would we turn down all the good things we can get from the government? Housing, food, clothing, shelter. You must be crazy, Eldridge, Henderson. I'm going to pray more to get more. I don't need to be doing all them other things. Man, you have lost your mind. Mr. Socrates, that's what I have to deal with, and some of those people I have that's doing these workshops and seminars with us. And we've been doing this a long time. Shall I change, or shall I continue to talk about self-determination, collective agreements among ourselves, majority control in areas and specific activities that I've mentioned and been mentioning? Tell me so I can help myself, sir.
Well, Doc, if you don't do it, who will? If you, what other voice do you hear other than yours that's talking and teaching black independence and self-reliance? What other voice do you hear?
Well, every now and then I hear voices, but they won't come out publicly. They tell me to keep on. But it's hard when you pulling that big elephant with a shoestring. It's hard, man. And those people that are telling me certain things know more about it than I do, but they say they have too much to lose to get out here and talk about things. So, man, you know, I got grandchildren I got to support. You know, my wife just lost her job. You know, I'm 55 or 65 years of age. I got to work another 5 years to pay this big mortgage. Man, we have 3 cars that we are paying for. And I tell them, well, I have the same problem. So, who is right? Who is wrong, sir?
Well, I got to go back to this analogy of pulling an elephant with a shoestring. That pretty much describes the task. But if you don't give your time and your talents to generations to come, if you don't leave the record that says that we could have abolished slavery, I've heard you say it, in 90 days if we had been together, that there were more African Americans in Mississippi than Europeans, more of us than them, and yet we were enslaved. There are more Africans in Africa than all the other representations were France and Italy and Germany and China and Russia and the U.S., but yet we're being dominated. If you don't speak out and teach that you can pull this elephant with a string, then who will, Doc?
Well, there's something to be considered. The idea, though, Mr. Socrates and viewers and listeners, is that those of you out there that know more about these matters than I do ought to start working and use this strategy. You think about the things that you've heard on this show. Organize, don't criticize. And decide that I'm going to do the following. I'm going to look at myself first and see if I have any weaknesses. Do I have the ability to get a job that's going to pay what we call a livable wage? Do I need to enhance my skills? Not necessarily going back to school to get a degree in anything. You don't need to be wasting your time doing that. You already have a high school diploma. And you can do more with a high school diploma with additional training and certification than one could do with a PhD that's going to school until they're 35 or 40. I guarantee you they might have a PhD, but they owe $250,000 in student loans. Because most people that have high student loan debt, ladies and gentlemen, continue to go to school so they won't have to work. They say, I'm going to get another degree, get me another loan. I know a lot of them like that. And they get out of school and can't even get a job in the major because they had the wrong major. And here's old John Peterson that barely finished high school. And he got him a livable wage credential in computer technology, in welding, in plumbing. He decided he was going to get married and just demanded that his wife get a little job at the hospital after they worked and sacrificed, and gave her an opportunity to go to a little old community college and get a RN degree, registered nursing degree. That's what you do for yourself. And then once you learn to take care of yourself, ladies and gentlemen, you have to think about Mr. Socrates again in that song, Strong Family. You got to think about your family. Whoever the head is, the mother or the father, or the no mother or father, they got to set the tone and teach the kids, the children, the same thing that I just told you, that you have to look at yourself and make an assessment. Do I have a deficiency as a leader in this family? Am I teaching my children that they have to start changing their educational patterns, their work habits? Do we have any discipline in this house? Do we have any curfews? Are my kids so pretentious until they think I'm supposed to give them everything? Keep them here till they're 30 or 40 living with mother and father. They don't want to go to school. They say it's too hard. Say I didn't get good training when I was in high school. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you now, you're to blame for that. You had the money. You knew those kids were not A and B students. You wouldn't even get them any tutoring. You'd rather for them to have a pill. Talking about they got DHA and all kind of different problems. You give them no pills. You give them discipline. You chastise them. You use yourself as an example. And you work the devil out of them at home. And let them see what good work, discipline, a good spanking every now and then will do. You'll be surprised. When you tell them something, they will do it automatically, even when you're not there. And then once you get those children together, ladies and gentlemen, which some of you are not going to do, you say, I got to be easy on them. I don't want to hurt their feelings. Here you have two things. You have yourself together. You have your household together. You are a functioning unit of accomplishment. All of you are independent. And now the third component is your community. Black folks don't have a community nowhere in the world of any significance. They don't control the means of production, distribution, and the exchange of goods and services in not one community, even in Africa. So folks, when you don't do that, when you can't control your destiny, when you can't feed yourself, when you can't govern yourself, when you don't even have the ability to use all that gold you have, all the talents you have. Even here in America, you have some of the highest educated black folks in the world, and they can't even get a job because they don't control the jobs. They won't go in business and start off where they can be successful and then build, where they merge with another person or another group and get in what I call the expansive mode. So once you do that and get out there with that community, you start with your community organizations and teach the same things to your organization members, just as you taught yourself, just as you are teaching the family members, and then collectively, you then will be building yourself, your family, and your community. And when you know anything, ladies and gentlemen, it will become like the coronavirus. People will start thinking, doggone it, I am a man, I'm a woman, I can control myself. I don't need outsiders to determine my destiny. We can think, we can plan, we can delegate, we can do more than criticize. We can do more than pray. We're going to pray and work. Oh, we're going to seek, we're going to ask, we're going to do some knocking around here and change things. And I'm telling you, we're going to have to then make a decision whether or not we're going to have to get back with that black church and see if we can get them off that stool of non-compliance to a stool of performance. I say stool, not school. Sometimes you just sit around in these black churches and don't do a thing for you. They have millions of dollars, millions, every Monday. Don't even own a bank. Don't even own a high school. Don't even own a trade school. Don't even own a community, a residential community. Don't even own a manufacturing unit, but have millions. I'm not talking about in the state. I'm talking about in the city. Every Monday. Billions nationwide. And every time they have a meeting where they have to have more than 500 people, they have to go to outsiders and have a meeting at their hotel or at their convention center so they can be spied on. And all of their secrets are recorded because those guys are smart. They'll give your preacher or your community leader a discount to have a meeting at his place. And the discount is twofold. They give you a little reduction. They will give the preacher access to 1/3 of the hotel rooms. And he can charge what he wants for that to certain people, his congregation and certain friends. And the others will pay another price if he doesn't control them. And then the people that he is giving this, what I call support, will say, now we are going to record all of your information with our teams. I talked at this, been talking about this for a while, even to the bishop the other day. So I'm saying why the black church is not doing what it's supposed to do. Mr. Socrates, I have a question for you. Are the black church groups hurting or helping black people in America and the world? In your opinion, yes or no? And then decide how and how can you come up with solutions? If you say either one of them, what can you do better or more off?
Doc, I think that the black church has helped the black community in a significant way. When I think back to the times that black folk were under the direct control, the day-to-day activities, and they were as brutal as they could be, I think that the fact that black folk could believe in life after death as a way of changing their circumstance was helpful and kept a lot of them sane and gave them something to hope for, because they could see no hope during the conditions that they were in. Now, having said that, I think that once we became emancipated, once we became free Negroes, once we became independent and allowed freedom of movement and the opportunity to control our own destiny, I think that the church has hurt individuals because it does not push them toward achievement as much as it pushes them toward salvation.
Hold on, Mr. Socrates. I just told you that the black church got more money than they can spend properly. They can help change anything they want. And you were saying they are not using that ability versus they want people to be saved and go to heaven when they die and live in hell on earth? That's what you were saying to the people that's viewing and listening to the Elder Henderson Real News Show, Organize, Don't Criticize?
I think the church did not shift from the conditions and the times that it was beneficial to our people to the new times when black folk have to achieve. The church did not make the shift. It still kept teaching salvation and heaven and hell, as opposed to the other religions like Judaism and how the Catholic Church, how they controlled, and the economics was their primary mantelpiece. They controlled the economics. The African American churches didn't make that shift.
Sir, I believe you want to indict the church, Mr. Socrates. Ladies and gentlemen, I say I believe he's indicting the church. But I'm telling you right now, if you had to grade what he said from 0 to 100, I would have to give him 99.5. The church has not been able to shift its position. It has not practiced and promoted love within itself to be able to train and promote their own interests as a collective unit. It's an individualized interest where the pastors or the leaders, less than 1%, decided that they were going to look out for their destiny from birth to death. The preacher, the bishop, the board of trustees, the choir director. They all work together, ride well, live well. They go to all the conventions that you all pay for them to go to. And they don't even share that hotel room with you at that cheap rate unless you're in the clique. And I know a lot of you are going to criticize me for telling you the truth. And if you think I'm lying, when you get a chance, I don't want you to do it in the church meeting. You say, I'm going to make an appointment, Miss Secretary. I want to talk to the preacher. I want to talk to the priest. I want to talk to the president of this black denomination and see if what I heard on WeBelieveDigital.com is true. If I'm going to call someone at that station and make them apologize to me. Mr. Socrates, if they would do that and call me, shall I apologize or say, I can't apologize because I'm right?
Doc, I think that you and I are going to have to deal with this issue. It's such a serious issue, and our time has come and gone. It's such a serious issue. I would love for you to allow me to come back on your program and continue to deal with this serious issue that you're talking about.
Well, now you know I am, Mr. Socrates. So if you ask for a continuation, ladies and gentlemen, I'll give him an opportunity to come on Thursday this week, and we'll shift through these things again, shake it out. And then we're going to ask you all to email us some of your questions before Thursday. Email us with a question. CLU369@gmail.com. Again, send us a question. Whether the black church is doing you any good or not. Whether you're praying too much or not praying enough. Saying that those churches are broke and you can't do any better, Doc, because we don't have enough money. Email us, CLU369@gmail.com, and we'll read some of those. So how could they get to you, Mr. Socrates?
Doc, they can reach me at 601-209-9199, or you can reach me at 1-800-492-5186. Thank you, Doc.
Okay, folks, keep in mind, and don't ever forget, from birth to death, you have to think about one thing. That is, organize. Don't criticize the human enemies of mankind, their relatives, and their financial supporters. If you do this, ladies and gentlemen, they will love you, because criticism is in their favor. Organizing is in yours. See you next Thursday. Thank you very much.